Will you take us to Mount Splashmore?
No.
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 Will you take us to Mount
No.
Splashmore? Will you take us to
No.
Mount Splashmore?
If I take you, will you two shut up and quit bugging me?
Yeah, of course. Well, will you take us to Mount Splashmore?
Yes.
Thanks, Dad.
Hello, and welcome to the Simpsons Countdown, the podcast where we go back to the beginning and watch all of The Simpsons to trace the creative evolution of the series and count down, finding the exact moment in which it began its inevitable decline. I'm Erix Antoine, and this week I'm joined by my good friend Chris Prentice. We'll be discussing the episode Brush with Greatness, which originally aired in the U.S. on April 11th, 1991. In this episode, Marge revives her high school hobby of painting. When she wins first prize in a Springfield art competition, Mr. Burns commissions her to paint his portrait, to controversial results. In the B story, meanwhile, Homer goes on a diet after getting stuck in a water slide at the Mount Splashmore amusement park. The episode combines the ever-escalating wackiness of the show, post the gorge jumping, with a human interest story involving fat shaming and the importance of one's personal body image, resulting in a funny but also surprisingly heartfelt episode. It also has another rather important casting coup, with a fun cameo performance by Ringo Starr. Chris and I are going to talk about all that over the next 45 minutes. So without further ado, here we go. So welcome back, Chris. What's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just kind of taking it easy up in beautiful Northern California. We're looking at probably triple digits this weekend, so probably just going to be enjoying a lot of air conditioning.
Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
You know, what is it? These are the dog days of summer. I mean, you know, technically we're entering the fall, but you know, up there it's
yeah.
different.
No, here they're like where I'm at. There almost is no fall. We have about maybe 2 weeks of fall. It goes summer, about 2 weeks of fall, and then right into winter. So that's just the way it is around here.
Like, how cold does it ever get? Like low 50s?
Oh no, like
High
where I'm
40s?
at, because I'm in Sacramento, and so the winters actually get kind of pretty cold. I mean, at least by California standards. You know, there are times when it'll go down into like the high 30s. On like when it gets really cold. So that's not that uncommon for the winters, but it's yeah, it can get pretty you know, again, compared to a lot of the country, that's nothing. And people here high 30s, they could care less. But for people around here, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, throw on a nice sweater and like a London fog coat, and you can go out on a nice evening with weather like that.
Sure.
Just no problem there.
Yeah, there's really nothing that's going to keep people from well, I was going to say nothing that would keep people from going out, but I mean, who the hell knows if anyone's going out when it is winter anyway. So I have no idea.
Well, you know, down here it's sort of like that. You know, we just got through the quote unquote winter because I'm in South America, so it's kind of opposite. And but we just had like a cold front come back, so it's a bit weird. It's sort of like we were getting, you know, the cold weather was going away, and now it's sort of made it's kind of similar to you, though. I mean, on a really, really cold night, it will be in the 30s. You know what I mean? So it's not unbearable. Bundle up and you're fine.
That's right.
So anyway, you know, here we are. We're all stuck inside still, basically, most of us. You know, no one's going out partying. So we're all here watching The Simpsons, and we're here to talk about Brush with Greatness.
Brush with Greatness. This, you know, and I think before we get into the actual episode itself, because I've been whenever I've been revisiting some of these with you, it's been on the old DVD sets that, you know, I bought, you know, looking like 18 years ago or whatever these started coming out. And My God, the one for the second season, it has this feature. I don't know if you ever had these DVDs and if you know what I'm talking about, but it's like it'll come on and basically it'll have like four different characters in a circle. It'll be like Marge and Mo and Grandpa. And but like the heads and the bodies are not correct. It's like there'll be like Marge's head on Mo's body, and you have to constantly hit the enter button like 3 times to get them to circle around and have the right head on the right body. And it's only until you can do that that you can actually get into the episodes. And I just want to say, whoever designed that feature, I mean, maybe it seemed like a hell of a lot of fun back in 2002. It's pretty damn annoying. So that's my little gripe for against the physical media industry, even though they probably don't need my gripes at this point.
Yeah, well, you know what? I do have the DVD set. I think I have the DVD set for like the first 5 seasons, I want to say. I
Okay.
think, and so I definitely have this one. It's the one that came in like a green box. What I remember, it was like a greenish hue to the box, and
I think that's the second season, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, which is what we're looking at. And I think I
Correct.
remember now. I do remember that there was something annoying. Now you're bringing it up. I mean, I haven't popped in those DVDs in years, but now that you're bringing it up, yes, I remember that there was something really annoying about the menu. Like it was this weird sort of animated bullshit that you had to get through before you get to the. So yeah, that's quite something. I do remember that, and I think that it's a feature that kind of carries on into the other ones. I think maybe not. It's not exactly the same thing every time, but they always have some cute animated garbage that you have to sort of wade through before you can just select the episode you want to watch.
Yeah, I don't think they anticipated 18, 19 years ago just how damn busy we were. We don't have time for this kind of nonsense. But I guess people loved that kind of stuff back then, and it seemed like let's make the DVDs more fun than normal.
Right.
Yeah, it's really it's terribly annoying.
Yeah, well, it was all about the features, it was always,
Right.
So you'd look sometimes on the back of the DVD box, see what features it would have, and they would want to. Sometimes they wouldn't have much in the way of features, but they want to tout everything that was there. So you'd have like trailers, animated menus.
Yes.
Was one of the features. You know what I mean? Like as if that were something that you'd want. So obviously in this case, it was the whole animated menus thing, and then you had trailers. You had what was it like? Cast and crew bios.
Yeah, those were always my favorite on like the old movies. That was like the big DVD feature or the cast bios. It'll be like you'll be looking at the features for some God knows what Nicolas Cage movie, and you're like, oh, nephew of director Francis Ford Coppola, and so it's all very fascinating stuff.
Yes, the internet already existed. Yes, there were things like IMDb. I think it was already in existence at that time, but there were few things. So, it was helpful sometimes to have star filmographies kind of just there.
Sure saved me a lot of jams, I'll tell you that.
You get some DVD and then you go like, oh, it's let's say Firstborn with Peter Weller. Oh, look, he was in a film called 50-50 with Robert Hayes.
Yes. And if you were unfortunate enough to go out and buy the DVD for 50-50, then that's your own damn fault.
Are you ready for Fox DVD Video?
I've never seen anything like this before.
Unbelievable cutting-edge 3D menus.
So what do we think of this episode? It had been a while since I had seen it. Obviously, I had watched it before, but this was like the first time in many years that I was sitting down to watch it. And I was pleasantly surprised by it. I thought it was very funny. What was your experience of watching it?
Yeah, it's like when you mentioned that this was the one that we were going to do, I remembered the plot line about, Marge, becoming the painter and, eventually doing the portrait for Mr. Burns. But I really didn't remember kind of the B storyline with Homer's weight and everything that took place at Splash Mountain. So that stuff I really had completely forgotten about. So yeah, it was a lot of fun kind of seeing that. And I think the opening with Krusty basically doing pretty much an advertisement on his show for Splash Mountain, or what was it? What the hell's the name of the thing?
It's not Splash Mountain. It's Mount Splashmore.
Mount Splashmore, yes, Mount Splashmore.
Yeah.
So the whole kind of setup of Krusty, doing his show from there, and then basically doing it as an entire advertisement for the park was pretty funny. So I mean, seeing all that again was great, because I did not at all remember that those two storylines were linked up in this one.
This is something that, I mean, I guess it probably still goes on. I wouldn't know because I don't watch like the Disney Channel or any of those things. But I do remember that back in the day, whether it was on the Disney Channel or Nickelodeon or wherever it was, you'd have these big TV specials, these things that would be broadcast from like Disney World or from like Six Flags or one of those things, and then so you'd have something set up and with kids and like a variety show. And ultimately, whatever was on that program, whether it was New Kids on the Block or whatever it is, but it was essentially there to advertise whatever park or whatever thing they were shooting it from.
Yeah, I think Double Dare did stuff like that too, where they would do it like they'd have like the remote on location Double Dare somewhere, and that would sort of be somewhat of an ad for wherever the hell they were at. So yeah, so I mean that was that was fun to see again. And basically, I mean, I think all the stuff at the water park is pretty funny. There's a lot of good sight gags in there. When they're basically doing an ad in the middle of Krusty's show, they have kind of a brief flash that says 2-hour free parking. Who's going to be spending just 2 hours at the water park? But I mean, there were lots of pretty good sight gags in that whole sequence.
Right, and it's a pretty accurate depiction of those kinds of things. You brought up Double Dare. That is true. You're right. They did do a bunch of things from those sorts of. They did like special outdoor. It was an outdoor thing, and it was Double Dare. It was being broadcast from wherever it was. And just a bit, that brought back some memories when you brought up Double Dare, because I'm like, yeah, Mark Summers, who suffers from OCD, and this is something I don't know if you. I mean, I read about this. Were you familiar with that, with Mark Summers?
I was not aware of him having OCD. No.
He's the host of Double Dare, and I thought to myself, after every taping of that show, he must have gone backstage and just started shaking, like grabbing his knees and just,
Oh yeah. What I hated the most during that in the big obstacle course was when they had to dig through the big giant nose. Man, I could not stand that. I just thought that was just completely gross. I don't know. Gross. It's like I can take a lot. I hate booger humor. Like, I'm just not into booger humor at all. Those were always my least favorite Garbage Pail Kids. Any of the ones where they have like just a whole bunch of snot everywhere.
That's right. Yep.
Those I couldn't stand them. So yeah, that was like my least favorite part of Double Dare.
Hey Double Dare family, it's Liza and Mark here.
And they have just unboxed some of our favorite obstacles. We're going to start off with Old Faithful, the nose that knows all. It's called Pick It. What is it about the nose? We've taken this thing around the country, and people always want to have a picture taken with it. They want to put their hand up there. Yeah. Is it because you're forbidden as a child to pick your nose?
Pick your nose? Oh, I wasn't told that. I still pick it to this day. But
So the park is very accurately portrayed, and it's very funny. And you're right. I mean, I also remembered mainly the the A story, which is about Marge painting, getting back into painting and painting for Burns. It's like I remembered isolated things. That's the thing about The Simpsons, is that they're always so complex in their story construction, and they get more complex as they go along, that sometimes you might remember bits and pieces and think it's from two different episodes, but it's actually the same one, as is the case here. Of course, I remembered the whole thing about Homer getting stuck in the water slide. I remember that gag, but I just, I didn't remember from what episode it was.
Yeah, that whole sequence is, it's very funny, but it's also horrifying. Just like the thought of being stuck in the middle of one of those is like that's scary in and of itself. And then the idea of like several people being stuck together inside one of those is also pretty horrifying. But
Yes.
it's also funny. I mean, like when they are able to remove Homer in that portion of the slide, and everyone just starts booing him.
Right, well, because he's fucked up the ride, right?
Oh, I
now,
know.
like,
Of
that's
course.
it, And you've been online for 2 hours, and now guess what? You don't get to go on, and you're gonna have to like go somewhere else, and you've just wasted an hour of your time.
Yeah, I mean there's really good animation in that sequence, but it's like if you actually start to think about it as like a reality, it's just extremely horrifying to me.
Were it true, I think it would be a horrifying prospect, and it makes you. I mean, I don't know to what degree it's a realistic thing. I'm pretty sure that when they design these things, they take a lot of aspects into account. But you do sometimes see reports of like this is a while ago, but there was I saw like a blog or somebody who was overweight who had written a blog claiming that it was unfair that like she had tried to get on some roller coaster ride or some one of those things, and when she'd gotten on the thing, they bring down the safety bars, right, that are supposed to lock into place. And so, unfortunately, she was too large for the safety bars to come down properly. So they asked her. They said to her, "You can't ride on this. I'm sorry." Right. And so she obviously was very upset about this and said that they should take these things into account. And so there was a whole controversy that went around that. And I would imagine that maybe in a situation like that, if somebody is too large for a water slide, for safety reasons, they would tell this person that they can't go on. I mean, I really don't know how. I haven't been to a water park since I was a teenager, so I really don't know what that's like anymore.
I mean, I haven't been to one of those in a long time either. But yeah, I've been to like Disneyland the last few years, and but they pretty much I can't think of anything where nobody's been allowed on some kind of ride there.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if that does happen to you, that's a pretty shameful walk back to the way you came.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. You feel bad, and the one thing that about this episode, what it sets up, it's a gag, but it sets up what you refer to it as the B story, but I also think it's kind of the emotional core of the story of the episode, where you have because now this inspires Homer to go on a diet, lose some weight,
yes.
Right, and that's sort of like it's the emotional through line, and we see how he's struggling through it, and I think that is something that a lot of people can identify with, and it's handled in a rather poignant way. I liked the way that was handled. I thought it was sweet.
It is, but I gotta say that, boy, watching the stuff where Homer weighs himself, it kind of got depressing because like. I mean, I don't think of myself as straight up fat. Like I could certainly stand to lose some weight, but when Homer gets down to like his lowest weight, I think it was like 239. Like I'm not that far from that, and like I know I'm taller. Like I'm 6'2". I don't know exactly what they say Homer's height is. I don't think he's 6'2". So, but it was like depressing. Like, oh my God, I'm getting to like Homer, he's like the kind of the symbol for, kind of being a little hefty, and like I'm not. I mean, so it was, in a way, the episode was kind of a wake up call. A wake up to what? I have no idea, but a bit of a wake up call.
I can certainly sympathize with that. Me too. Like I look at it and I go like I could stand to lose a few pounds, much like you. I understand, and I've been living here for so long that the whole the feet and inches thing, I am now totally confused. Oh. But I am 1 meter 82 centimeters, and I have no idea what that is in feet. I think it's about 6. I think it's like 6'1". I think I'm right at the 6 feet like line. I'm like exactly 6 feet. Okay. So I go like, all right, so that's my height, and you look into it. So obviously there's the ideal weights for the height or whatever it is. I weigh less than Homer Simpson. when he's at his lowest. But much like you just said, not I'm not quite there, but I'm sort of like it's not.
But it's not like it's not that far. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
because like when I was a kid, like Homer was kind of the symbol of like a fat guy. I mean, that's just the way it
Right.
was. And so now, I mean, maybe our perception of that guy back then is different from what it is now. But I mean, it's like I'm sure you could look up exactly like what Homer's height is supposed to be. But I'm just gonna to make myself feel better. I'm just gonna say he's 5'7", and I'll just kind of leave it at that.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, they don't make a big deal out of it. But what it does portray, though, is that the idea of when somebody decides to diet or go into a regimen to lose weight, it actually does take a lot of sacrifice. And
Sure.
and I think that's something that it takes discipline and sacrifice. Not everyone is able to do it. Not everyone, for different reasons. Some people, it's not because it's not just a matter of discipline. I mean, it takes sometimes you're not able. If you're somebody who has a certain work schedule, you can't find time to go to the gym.
Yes.
Let's say like you go to work, and then you get home and you're exhausted. And the last thing you want to do is start lifting weights. You know what I mean? So it's things like that for people it just isn't feasible as much as they would love to. It's not feasible. So you do what you can. So you try a diet, you try this. That's why you have all these like fad diets, all of which are garbage.
Right.
But there's all that stuff. And then so okay, fine, you're gonna go down on this, go down on that. I mean, ultimately. But you see the struggle, and it's a real struggle. And he works really hard at it, and he tries, and he does lose some weight. And he gets to a point where he's feeling good about himself because he's doing it. He's achieving his goal. And he probably has a modest goal. And he figures, okay, I'll get to a place where I feel more comfortable about this. That's why you have that climactic moment in which Burns is so cruel to him.
Right.
And I think anybody can sympathize with that. At that moment, you really see just what a cruel person Mr. Burns is.
Marge, I'm 239 and I'm feeling fine. Look, I'm using the original notches that came with my belt.
That's wonderful, Homer. I'm so proud
Let
of
me
you.
get this straight. You're pleased with your current appearance? Why, my good man, you're the fattest thing I've ever seen, and I've been on safari.
If you need me, I'll be in the refrigerator.
It seems very sort of out of nowhere. Like it makes you wonder how these things were thought up in the writer's room, or how it came to be that they decided, hey, wouldn't it be good if we get Ringo Starr? You know what I mean? And
yeah,
because it seems kind of random. You know what I mean? When you think about it, like, oh, it's because they find, how does this get started? It's because they find a bunch of, when Homer goes to the attic looking for his weights, they find all these paintings that Marge did when she was a teenager, paintings of Ringo Starr.
Right.
You're like, all right.
And some of her with Ringo Starr.
Oh, of course, yes. That's and Homer is aghast at this, and I gotta say, it's like, dude, come on, like really, like it surprises you that like your wife when she was a teenager was into the Beatles, like
I mean, I gotta figure because maybe not so much now. I mean, because obviously everyone, the Beatles, it's still huge, it's still big, but I think it was back when this aired, like in the early 90s, getting Ringo Starr was a much bigger deal to me, I would think, because that was kind of the height, obviously not of Beatlemania, that had passed, but in terms of nostalgia for the Beatles, it was pretty big back at that time. So I mean, getting him to guest star, I mean, because I know George Harrison ended up doing it and Paul McCartney, but I mean, Ringo was the first of the then living Beatles to do the show, so that's a pretty big guest star. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I'm not sure what the process is, if like first they know that they have Ringo and they have to kind of craft some kind of a story around that, or how that I would think that would be interesting, because I'm sure no writer basically pitches a story about Marge, doing paintings of Ringo Starr. They must know that Ringo is gonna agree to do a voice, and then you have to kind of craft a story around that. That would be my guess. But I mean, that must have been a huge get for them at that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was obviously a huge get, because it's like, I mean, as you said, and this is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And to give some perspective, and even then, that was already 30 years
since they had come to America. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it was, it was still a thing. So to give some perspective, you got to go, well, what would it be now? That's what we're saying. Like, it would be the equivalent of, like, if you got like Eddie Vedder or somebody to go on The Simpsons, which eventually they did. But I mean, now, if it were now, I'm trying to think what the equivalent. So people,
there was really no. At least, and again, I mean, I wasn't around when the Beatles first came here and all that, but I don't think there was one band that was kind of the equivalent through the 80s and 90s, that if you were to have somebody on the Simpsons today, that it would mean as much. I mean,
not at all. There isn't. It doesn't.
Right.
And the thing is that anybody that would mean anything, right? Because of course, there are classic bands. I mean, the thing that bands that we listened to in the 90s are now considered classic bands.
Right.
That in their own way have a certain level of impact. It's just that the Beatles were a very unique thing. Obviously, it's a phenomenon that has never quite been repeated in that way. But the other thing also is that if there is a big musical act over the last 30 years, by this point, they've been on The Simpsons. What we're trying to highlight is that 30 years ago, though, the idea of this animated cartoon, this TV show, basically, this cartoon show, getting that sort of pedigree, that somebody like Ringo Starr would agree to be on it, it was a huge deal. Like it seems like a little, like, might seem like, well, it's a popular show. No, I mean, back then, the idea that he would actually do that was incredible.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's hilarious that a big portion of how he is portrayed is of diligently returning all of these, fan letters and writing everyone back, apologizing for the late response, and going through, because I don't know if you saw this, but this had to have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Ringo put out a video, and I'm sure it's probably still on YouTube. He put out a video where he's extremely serious, and he's basically announcing, after such and such date, do not send me any letters or any items. Anything that is sent to me after this date will be thrown in the trash. I will not accept any more of it. It's gotten to be too much, and it's just too much. And then at the end he says, peace and love. So it was funny seeing him portrayed as being so hardcore about returning every letter and responding in this episode, after that video from a couple years ago where he basically just told everyone, stop sending me all your crap, I don't want it anymore.
And of course, it's completely unrealistic, because,
right.
There's no way. It's not even out of him being an asshole. It's just that when you imagine the amount of fan mail that he has to actually respond to every single letter, he'd still be doing it.
As far as I know, he's the only celebrity to specifically go on YouTube and tell people on no uncertain terms, do not send me anything ever again. So I found that kind of ironic compared to how he was portrayed in this episode. But I thought, his appearance is pretty funny. There's no doubt about it.
They took the time to write me, and I don't care if it takes me another 20 years. I'm going to answer every one of them. Hello, what's this? From Springfield, USA. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing, I think you might be right. I think now that I think about it, you're gonna say that Marge painted a Beatle, right? I guess maybe they figured, and this is, all due respect to Ringo Starr, but I guess at the time they figured, well, if we're going to get one of them, I guess Ringo. Paul McCartney will probably tell us to go fuck ourselves, and George Harrison as well. So let's try for Ringo. Let's try for Ringo. If anybody was going to say yes, it was going to be Ringo, right? So all due respect to Ringo. But I think what happened was they probably sent feelers out. It's like, hey, would you be interested in doing The Simpsons? And he must have said yes. And then they said, all right, well, he said yes. So now let's figure out how we can use him.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly what you just said. Like it basically was just, let's figure out how we can use him. And then somebody said, well, it would be funny if like Marge is a fan of his and paints him. And then apparently what happened was, so they sent him the script and he liked the story and actually wanted more. He said like, because I think originally it was a little throwaway gag. It wasn't, I think he just probably had one line or one thing. And he said, give me a few more lines. This is a nice story. I like this script. I'd like to do a little more if I can. And so I think so they came up. So he's got 2 scenes in the episode as opposed to just one.
Dear Marge, thanks for the fab painting of yours truly. I hung it on me wall. You're quite an artist. In answer to your question, yes, we do have hamburgers and fries in England, but we call French fries chips.
And so we get to the heart of, like, I guess the main story is that, that Marge takes up painting again and eventually is hired to paint a portrait of Mr. Burns. I like John Lovitz. John Lovitz is funny as like the very enthusiastic art professor.
I gotta say, I mean, he is funny as the art professor, and I like the bit where he's walking by the maintenance man painting the railing and complimenting him, and that's all very funny. But I gotta say that I don't think that the painting teacher is his best character in this episode, because I don't know if you caught the other voice that he does in this episode.
I did not.
Well, he is the voice, and he's the voice of the person who owns the donut shop that delivers to the power plant.
Oh, that's right.
When upon learning that Homer's on a diet.
Hey, what gives? These donuts are piling up.
Yeah, Homer Simpson went on a diet.
Oh my God! And I just bought a boat.
I think in this episode also, though, they're starting to really develop the whole thing with Smithers. I mean, you really see here, I think, might be where they started to plant the seed of what we would eventually come to learn about Smithers.
Yes, definitely. There's like you said, this is, if there was kind of any question about Smithers before this episode, it's like you watch this one and you're like, okay, there's definitely something up here with the admiration that Smithers has for Mr. Burns. It's a little bit more than just respecting your boss that's going on here right now.
It's this thing where you go, okay, and then if you want to look at it from like a realistic perspective, you kind of wonder why, because truly Mr. Burns is a real piece of shit of a person. Yeah. I guess everybody has somebody that loves them, and that's fine. But it's just in this episode, I think it is just really interesting because you see how Burns essentially just constantly abuses everyone that he comes into contact with.
Smithers, I want my tea. Bah, too hot.
You're right, sir. It's scalding me as we speak.
Yeah, it's practically an S&M thing they've got going there.
Like, I'm trying to think, like, because even though it's kind of strongly hinted at in this episode, I'm trying to think like the first time where it's like explicitly spelled out that Smithers is basically in love with Mr. Burns. In this episode here, you can kind of, like you said, it's like the seeds were being planted.
Yeah, the seeds are being, I mean, here you don't really see, they're still just hinting at it. It's not, right. There's nothing overtly romantic here. You just see a really devoted person. Yes. And that's really what you see. So you still don't quite have the romantic angle yet. But then eventually it starts to get more and more extreme. I don't know if it's in the 3rd or 4th season where you already have him having this fantasy where Burns flies in through the window.
That's right. That's right.
It's a dream that he's having. So you go like, I think that's where it already becomes, okay, this is more than just a very devoted person. He's in love with them. I mean, it's a lot more. But it takes a minute to get there. But they're already planting the seeds that he's an extremely devoted. I mean, as we understand that Smithers even lives with him. I mean, anytime we've seen the mansion, Burns lives by himself in this gigantic mansion, and he's got Smithers, and so
right.
So I think that he's always there for him, and
yeah, that's like you said, that is kind of one of the interesting little when you watch it now, that's one of the interesting things from this episode that kind of jumps out at you is okay, they're starting to take Smithers in a different direction, and because it's like kind of before this, Smithers, it was just kind of like he's a dick, and it's like, yeah, he's like Mr. Burns' assistant, but he's a jerk, and he's there's nothing more really going on. But this episode starts to take things into a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's where he's really truly devoted to him.
Doesn't it bother you that he orders you around like that?
Oh, actually, I value every second we're together. From the moment I squeeze his orange juice in the morning till I tuck him in at night. He's not just my boss. He's my best friend, too.
One of the other moments that I love in this one is when Mr. Burns is posing and Smithers is reading him the funny pages from the day and reading him the Ziggy comic that appeared in the funnies that day, and we get the great line from Mr. Burns of Ziggy, will you ever win?
Do they still run Ziggy? Does that even still exist?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really look at the funnies very often. I don't know if Ziggy, maybe that was like a regional thing. Like, I know what Ziggy was because there were like Ziggy books, but I don't really remember Ziggy ever in the funny pages growing up. I don't know if that was more of like an East Coast or a Midwest thing, because I don't really remember ever seeing Ziggy in the West Coast funny pages. I could be wrong. I mean, maybe I just wasn't looking close enough. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't really remember Ziggy ever, to be honest.
Like right now, I can picture him. I can picture the character. I know I saw him. I saw and it's one of those where it's just like a one panel thing. It's one of those like the Family Circus or like the Far Side where it's just like a one panel thing. And it is interesting though that there's so many of these comic strips, but I think Ziggy had already been around since God knows when. Because like these writers, like they put in stuff that they're really familiar with, that they grew up with.
Well, sure.
And so some of their references can be a little bit, slightly out of the times. You go like Ziggy is obviously that they wanted to make fun of. Just like a couple of weeks ago in the Bart Gets an F episode, Bart's Dog Gets an F, excuse me, the one about Sam's Little Helper. They at one point Tracy Ullman character says "Heavens to Murgatroyd." And he goes like, "Oh, you're doing a reference to Snagglepuss," and I'm just going like, who in 1991? I guess there were some kids that would have remembered Snagglepuss, but just in general, it's obviously from their childhoods, from the writers' childhoods.
Right. Well, and that's what makes, The Simpsons such an odd show now, being on for so long, is that, okay, if let's say you're somebody who's 18 now and you've been watching it since you were a kid, but if you try to watch the ones from the early 90s, you're not going to know any of this stuff. There's just so much pop culture that's being thrown at you in these. Like, there's really no frame of reference for any of it, basically.
Yeah, that is the thing. That's why I'm saying, like, here you've got references to Ziggy, you've got like the things like that where you go like, okay, the Beatles. Obviously the Beatles is a famous band. A lot of people you always don't know, but like, it is true. That's an interesting point. We're looking at something that is from 30 years ago, and 30 years ago was already referencing stuff that was a little bit old.
Yeah,
and so even now it's just ancient.
Right, because like there's the bit in this one where Mr. Burns where they bring up to Mr. Burns Ringo Starr, and Smithers basically, so they were the rock band of the 60s, and then Mr. Burns remembers, oh yes, I remember catching their caterwauling on the old Ed Sullivan show. I don't know what Ed was thinking. It's like, yeah, it's one thing if you're watching that in the 90s and you're a kid and you're like, okay, I've kind of heard there was this old show, the Ed Sullivan show, and I guess that's where the Beatles made kind of their American debut. But it's like, if you're watching that today, it's like, it might as well be like from a whole other language, basically.
That's the interesting thing about looking at it years later, is looking at that sort of evolution, how it was capturing the pop culture zeitgeist of the 90s.
Yes.
But it didn't really start getting sharp, like on stuff that was very, let's say, topical, right? That didn't happen for another year or two. We've got another season, maybe 2 seasons to go before it starts to get really cutting edge, because the writers that come in are younger, and so they start doing stuff that's a little bit more of the moment. Here, it's still boomers. It's still boomers kind of reflecting on their own childhoods, their own teen years, and sort of throwing that together. And it, it worked, but these are old references. These are old references. And so it's like, what kid today is going to know what the Ed Sullivan Show even was?
To me, that's just fascinating on that level. There's really, what other show has this issue, basically. In a way, I guess we're kind of getting to the point where South Park has that issue. I haven't really looked at old South Parks and really almost ever, but I gotta imagine it's kind of to the point now where if you look at some of their old episodes, there's probably all kinds of stuff that if newer or younger people watching it today would have absolutely no idea what they're talking about.
Right. Well, I do think that in that case, because South Park already, when they started, were a little bit more on the edge. Like they were a little bit, that was the whole, so they were already doing stuff that was, at the moment, was kind of topical, and they sort of kept that going throughout their, their history. But yeah, I could imagine somebody today watching like the first couple of seasons of South Park will run into stuff that's of that time. And you might even going as far as the movie, in the movie, there's the big joke where Windows 98 crashes, and so they bring in Bill Gates and they blow his head off.
Fucking Windows 98! Get Bill Gates in here! You told us Windows 98 would be faster and more efficient with better access to the internet!
It is faster, over 5 million.
When I was sitting in that theater, when that happened, the theater just erupted into applause and cheers, just throughout the entire theater. It was incredible. We were all very, very happy that Bill Gates had gotten what he deserved. And so it was just this thing. And you go all right, but now who even cares about Windows 98? It's that even.
Yeah. It's, it's like in a way, it's like that's kind of stuff only can happen with these animated shows that go on forever, because it's just not really an issue for live action shows, because A, they don't usually last over 20 to 30 years, and B, if they for some reason you can take Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's, even though they've had long gaps, it's from the very first time it was on to most recent, it's been a long run. But since it's not animated, the actual characters are aging as well, so there's no basically effort to try to appeal to a different audience, because it's hey, this is the character, they used to be this way, they're this way, it's 15 years later. So I don't know, it's just kind of fascinating that these animated shows kind of have to deal with trying to stay relevant and keeping up with everything that's going on in pop culture, and and a lot of times the original episodes are just going to seem very dated to the newer audience.
Exactly. The thing is that the Simpsons as characters are frozen in time, so they don't experience character development, character growth in a real way, as opposed to, like you said, in a live action show, as the actors age, their characters can also age, and then you kind of write that into the show. But in this case, they don't really do that, because these characters are frozen in time. The world around them is aging, and so they have to maintain their perspectives. And that, that is interesting. It presents a lot of interesting challenges for storytellers. And we're going to see that in the evolution of the show. But here, it's a strange thing. It's strange how it's a time capsule and it's just so eternal. And for me, it's just going to be fascinating to see the evolution of the show when it starts to catch up. When I start getting to like the years that I had stopped watching, when it starts to catch up with the mid 2000s. And I think I'm going to start to feel like I'm the one who's out of touch. Like I'm saying, well, I don't get this anymore. I mean, it's the same voice actors. Right. It's not the same. It's not the same writers, but it's the same voice actors. And it's the same world being depicted in terms of the animation, but everything else is going to be changing. And so I think it makes this show very unique, and that's why its evolution is so interesting because of the fact that they're frozen in time, and so the world around them changes, and you see that reflected in the show, but they never change. And that's the interesting thing about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree totally. It's just one of those things that the more you think about it, the more interesting it is. And it's like when they're actually doing the show, like when they're doing this episode, they don't know that this show is going to be on 30 years later. They probably think, oh, okay, if we can just get to 100 episodes, then we'll be in syndication, and that would be great. They don't know that this thing is going to be this juggernaut that just goes on forever. So when you think about all that, it's kind of fascinating.
I'm no art critic, but I know what I hate. And I don't hate this. Your painting is bold, but beautiful. And, incidentally, thanks for not making fun of my genitalia.
I thought I did.
So she ultimately decides to paint Burns.
Right.
And she does a nude portrait of him. And it's because she walked in on him in the bathroom, so she gotta look at him. She gotta look at what he's like naked.
Walked in on him coming out of the tub. Meanwhile Smithers is right there, no problem, because as Mr. Burns says, you're like a doctor. So that's interesting right there, that apparently it's just kind of common for Smithers to be on hand during Mr. Burns's bathing ritual.
And Bart's like, does he have all those spots all over his body?
Yes.
Like, indeed he does.
Right. Yes. But I think it's hilarious. I mean, obviously, whatever, it's for the show, but it's hilarious that Mr. Burns, we see him looking at all these pieces of art that are made of him that he rejects, and he's got this whole room full of rejected paintings and busts. But for Marge's painting, he doesn't want to see it at all. He wants to wait till it's unveiled in front of everybody at the same exact time, and that's just fine with him.
And that's the other thing too. What we see of the paintings that he rejects, some of these are pretty flattering depictions. I mean, they're either pretty accurate or flattering in some cases, but he rejects them for whatever reason. And then what Marge does is a lot more kind of shocking and provocative than what any of these people did, which makes me think maybe Burns really was looking for true art, something artistic and truthful. So in a sense, he's rejecting the flattering or traditional depictions of him because he doesn't see them as, he looks good in them, but he doesn't see them as truthful. But I think what Marge ultimately does moves him. And I mean, I don't know to what degree this is taken from history. It might be, and I also don't know how true this is. But because this is something that I only know because I watched the Netflix series The Crown.
Oh, okay.
I somehow doubt that that's your cup of tea, but
it's not mine. But my mom loves it. She's I've spoken to her, and she mentions that she enjoys that show quite a bit. So it obviously has a big following. I haven't caught that one yet.
Yeah, it's not probably, but I will say this: it is quite. I watch it with my dad. It's a thing that we do, and so like it's a good show. It's very well. And in the first season, you got John Lithgow playing Winston Churchill, and he does a phenomenal job. So if you ever want to give yourself a few minutes, at least for that reason, I would recommend that you watch a few episodes or just see if maybe you'd appreciate the John Lithgow aspect. But why am I bringing this up? Because there is an episode towards the end of the first season in which Winston Churchill hires an artist to paint a portrait of him. And basically the whole episode revolves around that. And so ultimately it's very similar to this in the sense that he is very, what the artist ultimately does is to paint something that shows Winston Churchill in a truthful light, in a fragile light. Okay. And that deeply offends Winston Churchill. So like it's sort of like they're taking that concept and turning it on its head, because what Marge does ultimately is she decides that she wants to take this man who is an evil man, just a terrible person, but he wants to show his inner fragility, and sort of show that he's just a fragile human being.
He's bad, but he'll die. So I like it.
I think Burns ultimately, maybe that is why he likes the painting, is because he sees that. He sees that it is reflecting a certain inner truth about him.
That's what Marge was going for. That was her talent, and she's even though it took quite a while for her to get to that inner beauty, she was finally able to figure it out.
Homer, what are you doing? Give me that!
No, Marge is right. What's the use?
Don't you listen to him? He's just a mean little SOB.
So yeah, so what do we think of this episode? What's our verdict here? Do we think this is a good episode? Do we think it holds up? Do we?
Yes, it's a good episode. It holds up. I think it's got a little bit of everything. I mean, all the water park stuff, that's funny on its own. Everything with Marge and her interactions with Mr. Burns, that's funny. Homer's attempts to lose weight are funny. So I mean, it's a well-rounded episode. It's got the good kind of quick gags, like we mentioned, the scene with the guy that runs the donut business. I mean, that's just a quick throwaway gag, but it's hilarious. And I think this episode has a lot of stuff like that, and it's definitely a good episode.
It's well written. It has a good combination of the A story and the B story. It sort of binds them together. It uses elements of the B story to sort of grant the A story its emotional climax. And so it's just a very well written piece of comedy. And I love the little jingle that Krusty has the kids sing for
of course.
Mount Flashmore. Take me, take me, take me, take me now.
I want to go to Mount Flashmore. Take me, take me, take me, take me now. Now, 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 now. Mount Flashmore, take me there right now. This is a rather shameless promotion. Hey, it worked on me. Me too.
So this was a really fun talk. I enjoyed talking about this. It's a good episode. I enjoyed watching it. Enjoyed going over it with you. Looking forward, you're going to be back next season for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
The season's already kind of winding down. We're down to like the last 4 or 5 episodes, but you will definitely be back next season. And, it's in season 3 that things really start to pick up. Like,
right.
It's where we really start to get to the point where this is classic Simpsons. This is the Simpsons that, we're entering that golden age. That's where all the memes come from. That's where this is the one. This is where it really starts to get to that point. So I think we're going to be having a blast in the upcoming seasons. I want to thank you for joining me today. It was fun.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'll definitely be looking forward to the next time. And yeah, like you said, season 3 is where things really start to come together. So I'll enjoy going back and checking out some of those episodes.
Yep. I'll see you then. So that's it for this week's installment of The Simpsons Countdown. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please give us a like. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. This podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Anchor FM, and other podcasting platforms. A brief review might actually help boost the podcast's profile, so by all means, feel free. And if it isn't too much trouble, please do share this with all your friends on social media. I'm Erix Antoine. I'll be back next Thursday evening to talk about Lisa's Substitute. in which Lisa develops a crush on her substitute teacher. A sweet coming-of-age story featuring Dustin Hoffman in a very entertaining guest role. My good friend Josh Fine will be here to discuss that, and I hope you'll join us. Until then, stay safe out there, continue observing your biosafety and social distancing protocols, because whether your area is opening up or not, we are not quite through this thing, and we need everyone to do their part keeping themselves and everyone else healthy. And we'll get through this in due time. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Slim Fast help make losing weight easier because it counts the calories and you lose the weight. Each delicious shake is a complete... Shh.